So, Chris, you're a traveling trader and you have a blog that's been there online for a long time. So, I wanted to kind of start and tell people how you began trading exactly. When did you come across trading in the first place?
Right. So I started trading sometime around 2005. So that's when I was in university. So I attended a seminar held by some institutional traders. They had a series of seminars and I attended all of them. And following that, I went on to books, online courses, forums, the usual. So that was maybe the first 20% of my trading experience. That was the first few years. But later on, the other 80% of my trading repertoire or my trading learning journey came from the market directly. So I learned by just watching the market and relating, seeing how the market price moves during news, how it moves during normal times. I learned a lot more that way. And actually that helped me get a lot more experience and confidence in trading.
So, how was the learning curve for you to be able to learn how to trade? Did you find any kind of tough moments and how did you overcome them?
Right. So definitely, I think any trader or any serious trader will go through difficulties. And actually, I think if you haven't really gone through any difficulties, you're going to have a tough time coming up because I don't know of any trader. And based on my experience, so I've been trading since around 2005, right? So there is no time where within the past 10, 15, 16 years that the market has not thrown a spanner into the works, right? So every trader, I believe, will have at least a few difficult periods. And in fact, I would say that, in my opinion, it is the ability of the trader to overcome such difficulties that will define how they perform going into the future. Because whether it's having a tedious few months or even a few years where you're working yourself out of a drawdown or you take a bad hit from a flash crash or whatever the case may be, it's not uncommon for the market to throw something at you if you've been trading for, let's say, more than 3 years, approximately, right? So I think everybody will go through a difficult period. And it's the same for me. I had quite a lot of difficult, challenging periods. Some of it was because of the market, but a lot of it was because of myself. I made a lot of mistakes. I repeated a lot of mistakes. And I'm actually quite a slow learner. So I've actually hit the wall quite a lot of times before it finally got to me that, okay, you've got to stop doing this. And it was quite a slow journey for me. I think compared to the average person, I probably took a longer time to get to profitability because I was stubborn in a way that did not help me progress quickly. Yeah, so it was quite difficult for me, especially.
What were some of these common kind of tough times or mistakes you've made in the past that kind of maybe hurt your progress as a trader?
I would say the first mistake probably would be to listen to books rather than the market, right? So that's one thing I took quite a lot of time to get over. I was, by the way, I was brought up in Singapore. And so I had spent the first maybe 16 years of my life in the education system, reading books, being told what to do, how the world is. So that was how I naturally responded to the market when I first started trading. I thought the books would tell me how to trade. And so I followed all the typical technical analysis setups, in technical indicators, and I kept stumbling, but I didn't understand why. I was following the instructions, but I was not getting the result, a positive result. So the first big obstacle that I faced was being able to let go of the idea that I could be told by a set of instructions how to trade, right? So I had to let go of the idea that there was somebody else somewhere, some expert, some market wizard that could tell me how to trade rather than learning for myself. So it was quite a difficult adjustment period for me. So this was somewhere in the middle, maybe like 5 years after I started trading, when I started to realize that I had to figure this out for myself. Books were great, courses were great. They have their place, but to be able to generate alpha from the market, I think a lot of it has to do with self-learning, right? So going back again to books and courses, I think these books basically tell you the answer, right? They give you the answer, this is what you should be doing. And then you're waiting for the market to ask you the question, which answer should you apply to this question, right? So it's similar to school where you're given the answers to a formula. And then in the exam, the teacher asks you, okay, what is the answer to this question? And then you give the answer, right? But the market, it does not work this way. Right? So trading does not work this way. In trading, you not only don't know what the answer is in advance, you also don't actually even know what the question is. So you need to figure out what the question is and then find the answer, right? So to cut things, long story short, I think getting over that way of learning is one of the biggest obstacles I overcame at first. And later on, after I started to learn to get profitable, the next difficulty for me was overcoming drawdown periods. Right, so I would perform well for a while, and then I would go under drawdown, and I would start doubting the system. I would start reacting to short-term results rather than the whole long-term performance statistics. Right, so that's the other obstacle I had to go get past. And after getting past that, I think the most recent difficulty or failure that I encountered, this was probably 3 to 5 years ago, was taking on outside capital. So I was trading capital of other people that was not entirely my own. And that was a different kind of challenge, because for that, there were technical difficulties, there were psychological difficulties that I had underestimated. I did not expect when I first went into it. So that took a little bit of time to iron out as well. But I think at the top of my mind right now, these were the 3 major difficulties that I had to overcome.
So I want to go back to the one you mentioned about learning from the market. So how exactly do you do that? Is it you do some kind of testing, or you go back in time, or maybe you talk to other traders? How do you do it on your side? How did that work?
Right. So I took a long time, I think longer than necessary, to learn properly how to trade, because I did everything, most of it myself. And I think in hindsight, that might have been a mistake on its own, rather than, like you said, right, learning from other people, which is why I think your channel and your podcast is such a valuable resource for traders, because you get to hear viewpoints that you might not ordinarily see yourself, right? So going back to your question, the way I learned from the market, there are 2 ways, right? So on one hand, I learned how to quote myself, right? Because being able to objectively test your hypothesis in the market is very, very important, right? If you manually backtest, it's very likely that you will introduce biases to your the execution of the way you backtest, compared to if you do it on computer code. So that was the reason why I took a few years to learn how to code. And that enabled me to run tests that were thousands of trades across 5 years, 7 years, that I would have taken months to do by hand. So that was one way I learned, right? To look at the long-term statistics rather than the short-term, maybe 1 year's worth of trades, right? So being able to learn from the market by analyzing data from a big picture perspective. So that's one. So the second one is, the second way I learned from the market was to just keep the charts open all the time, and to get an intuitive feel of what type of price action is normal and what's not normal, right? So now if you show me a Euro USD chart, for example, I can tell you, okay, is there anything important happening, anything unusual? Because I've watched the price move so many times, so many days over the years, that I can roughly tell approximately what is an unusual behavior and what is not unusual behavior. And if there's unusual behavior, then I will start to look, okay, what's going on? Is there news? Is there a surprise event? Is there something that was unexpected, right? So these 2 aspects, quantitatively and qualitatively, both, the way I learned these 2 aspects, both come from the market, not from books. Yeah, so these are the 2 ways.
So some people might say, well, you have an advantage when you trade manually compared to doing a backtest with some coding, is that you can understand the market better and the results will be better. Do you agree with that? Or do you think that purely systematical or purely like mechanical would be in general better?
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good question. I was thinking about this question maybe a couple of years ago when I was just getting into algo trading. So when I taught myself to code. So my opinion is that both approaches have their merits, the pros and cons. I do agree that discretionary trading if done properly, does have an edge over mechanical trading, in the sense that mechanical trading is a lot more easy to duplicate. Right. So if you can think of an effect to test from the market, let's say, okay, let's use a very naive example. Let's say a moving average crossover, because I think everybody should understand what that is. So let's say we test the moving average crossover and we run it across, let's say, 10 years across 28 currency pairs, for example. It will take another coder maybe a week to do the same. And if there is any alpha there, if there's any advantage any tendency to be taken there, it will be very quickly replicated, right? So to me, algo trading is an arms race, essentially, right? You're always running to find what's the edge. You want to find a faster computer. You want to find, you want to locate your servers closer to the exchange and all these things. It's a different game compared to discretionary trading, which is noticing things that other people won't not necessarily notice. And you can notice these things because you have so much experience that you can tell what is normal. Again, like I said, what is normal and what is not normal. And this is not something that can be easily detected, in my opinion, by algos. Right? Algos do what do you tell them to do, but you need to know what to tell them to do in the first place. So I think discretionary trading does have an edge over algo trading, but it takes a lot more effort to get discretionary trading working compared to algo trading, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you got a lot more of execution to do when you trade with the discretion, when you trade manually.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. So would you agree that when you code algos different strategies than you would do manually? Because I feel like if you code something people can do manually, then it's not really worth to code, or
right.
People can do it manually better. Would you agree with that? Are strategies with algo different than the ones you would trade manually?
So the algos that I use that are completely offhand, those I do using different strategies. That being said, I do have certain systematic processes in my discretionary trading that I use algos with as well, but those require my oversight.
How would you describe then your trading style these days? It's a mix of both algos and manual. And right, so, is it more like day trading, swing trading? How does that look like?
Right. So I think the best way to describe how I trade today is price action within a fundamental context. So it's still both quantitative and qualitative. I try to stay away from completely quantitative measures because, like I said, if you just rely on data alone, I mean, raw data, right? So you crunch numbers, you find statistical significance, and you do all of these things. It's a different game compared to discretionary trading. And to me, I'm more inclined towards discretionary trading because I feel it's easier for me to do certain things that it's more difficult for an algo to do. So my inclination is closer towards discretionary.
And what time frame do you primarily trade on?
So as much as possible now, I'm moving closer towards an intraday time frame. So previously, I used to hold trades for over a few days to a couple of weeks. But with the changes in the fundamental landscape today, I've been adjusting to a smaller time frame kind of trading timeline.
You mentioned that you've been trading capital for investors before, for other people.
Yeah.
I've done that the same thing for a few years as well. What would be your advice for people who want to start with that? What would you tell them to kind of do it at first, and what are all the other things that come after with it?
Right. So I think the most important thing I would say is don't take money from your friends and family. Personally, that had a much larger negative impact on my trading psychology than I had expected. Right. So I would say if you want to trade with other people's money, do it with people who are traders, who understand that sometimes you're going to draw down, what that means. They are able to sort of roughly judge how you're doing, versus family members who say, okay, I trust you, here's my money, do something with it, right? So one of the mistakes I made was I took money. I thought I was doing well. I should share my skill with the people around me that I care about. But paradoxically, that was a mistake because it affected me in ways that I did not expect. Yeah, so first thing I would suggest is don't take money from your friends and family and people you care about. Second, I would say do it slowly. So because the thing is, in my view, that the world we live in today, trading skill is much more scarce than capital. If you can generate above market returns with relatively low drawdown, you don't have to worry that you don't have enough capital to trade with. People will put money with you very quickly, right? So my suggestion would be to start slow and to grow slowly. Because at the time, one of the mistakes that I made was when I was doing well, a lot of capital came in, more than I had expected. And that sort of kind of got me over my head, and I didn't realize it at that time. So there are a lot of changes that will happen as you take on capital, and you need to move slowly enough to be able to notice what these changes are and to address them as you go along.
What do you do then to kind of be able to stay on track with the capital you manage? Because of course, the more you get, the more you can get stressed about it, and the more kind of things can come up. So what are some tactics or tools of use to kind of stick to the process better?
I think the most direct one is to just stop taking in new capital. And in fact, even consider returning some of it. Because it's much better to trade with less capital, but with your reputation intact, than to take the risk and then risk your reputation. So that was the other mistake I made. So my reputation definitely took a hit because I took quite some heavy losses that were outside of my usual parameters, right? And in hindsight, that was a mistake that took a couple of years at least, actually, for me to get over psychologically, to be able to start considering even handling capital again. So it's better to take a step back than to keep going forward and risk falling off. So that's my suggestion.
That's good advice. So you've been trading and traveling for a few years now. Like we mentioned before when you chatted, you kind of stopped a little bit due to COVID, like I did as well. Tell me how that passion for travel came in, and how did you begin to trade and travel?
In my mind, trading and traveling are very similar things in the sense that they are both focused on independence. And when you're out of your comfort zone in your home country, you are alone. You need to start to find a way to live and to build a life for yourself, which is not unlike trading, where you have to move out of the typical way society is structured to come up with your own approach to navigating, in this case, the market, right? But in travel, it's navigating, how do I want to live? How do I want to spend my time? What time do I want to wake up in the morning? These are the things you need to think about that you don't normally think about if you're living in your normal world in your home country. So to me, these are very similar things, trading and traveling. And I got into traveling I started to travel more extensively sometime in 2011. So I did a few trips to the US. I did a few trips to Europe. And then finally, after that, I started to travel more around Asia. And I realized that I like Asia a lot more. And that's where I've been spending prior to COVID, maybe the past 5 to 6 years.
What are some of your tips for kind of keeping up trading while traveling? Because it can be hard to, especially when you go on planes a lot, you go on different places or boats. How do you kind of maintain your trading and still have fun, still travel at the same time?
So that's a very good question. So thankfully, at the time when I was traveling, I was trading a more medium-term approach. I think if you're doing more active traveling, you probably need something a bit more short-term. Mm-hmm. So what I do now is that I'm in Singapore right now. This is my home country. So I bring a laptop with me everywhere I go. And the way I trade is such that most of the time I'm not doing anything. But the moment I see a trade setup, so I'll usually check my phone if I'm outside. And if I see a trade setup coming up, then I will find a cafe, I'll find a bench somewhere, a park if I need to, sit down, turn on the data sharing on my phone, hook up my computer to my internet connection, and then trade there. Also, the way I trade is that I don't babysit my trades. Once the criteria has been hit, I wait for the right criteria, I enter the trade, and then I just keep monitoring it from my phone. If I do need to intervene, that's quite rare, but if I do need, I'll just find another place, sit down, pop up my laptop and trade. So I can't really trade from my phone. I don't know how people do it, but I use my phone mainly for identifying and monitoring. That's it. I don't trade from my phone.
Yeah, so that's good advice. I do the same. I tried before trading with my phone for a few weeks, but I couldn't do it. It's just too hard.
Yeah.
So I definitely moved to looking at the phone for like maybe alerts, checking that things are getting close to a trade, but then the trade is entered on the computer for sure.
Right.
That's fine.
Much easier. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite places to trade from? Either countries or cities or kind of places in general?
Strangely enough, I actually like trains. I think I don't know. There's something about trains and like opening up a laptop on a train and watching the scenery go by. I think there's something about that experience that appeals to me. When I'm on the move, sometimes in buses, I think maybe that's an aesthetic preference. I like to have things going on around me as I'm focused on my computer, which is a bit paradoxical. That's also why I like to do some of my writing for my blog in cafes rather than in an office. I've tried both. I prefer cafes. I prefer the buzz. I prefer the things going on around me.
That's cool. I tried to visit some co-working space before, like co-working office, and I just didn't like it. So
for me,
coffee works the best.
Exactly. Yeah.
So which countries do you prefer to either travel or trade in or just be in general?
I've grown to love Asia more. I used to like Europe a lot, but somehow after a while it starts to get boring for me, and I start to gravitate towards Asia. I really like Bali a lot. I was learning how to surf for a while, and I would like to go back again after COVID is lifted. I do also like Chiang Mai, Thailand. I like the pace of life. Maybe my age is showing. I'm slowly moving away from like the noise and like the messiness of the main cities generally. Taipei is okay too. These are my three main to-go countries personally right now. But of course, due to COVID lockdowns, I can't go anywhere. Hopefully that will be lifted at the end of the year. We'll see.
Are there some countries, and this is a tough question, but are there some countries that you don't like or that you wouldn't go back to?
That is such a good question. I would say, so I spent a bit of time in China. At the time, it was a tier 2 city. I didn't like it at all. I didn't last there very long, a lot less longer than I thought I would. So, but that was a few, like maybe 5 years ago, right? So maybe it's a lot better now. Or like I have not been to Shanghai. Maybe I would like Shanghai. Countries
Where
I don't
in China
like.
were you? Which city?
So I was in Guangxi. So that's the southern province.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I wasn't even in the main cities. I was like in a tier 2 city. Yeah, but like I think I heard it's better now. We'll see. Maybe I'll go back again to travel. So one place I can say I prefer not to go would be Malaysia. So I've been because Singapore and Malaysia are neighbors. I've been there a lot in the past, and it just doesn't gel with me for some reason. I just don't like the vibe of the city, if that makes sense. Yeah, and also food. Food for me is very important when I'm traveling. Like I need to like food, which is also, by the way, why I like Asia. Generally, I prefer Asian food, and like if I'm in Europe and I want to buy a bowl of noodles, it's like ridiculously expensive to get a legitimate like traditional kind. So I would say Malaysia, not a big fan.
Some people love it though, for sure. Some people love Malaysia. I'm not a fan that much, although I've had good times there for sure. So I'll probably go back eventually, but yeah, it's interesting to hear. Now, what are some of the routines you have while traveling to kind of stay sharp, stay on top of things, and trading wise and not trading wise, to make sure that you're always getting good results?
Right. So I think the thing about trading is that it's pretty much the same wherever I go, right? Because that's one of the reasons why we started trading in the first place, because we can trade effectively anywhere in the world. So and because I've been in Asia, my time zones are very similar. I don't have much disruption in my usual routine. One thing I do outside of trading to stay on top of things is I go to the gym. So over the past couple of years, I've started to get a routine where I go to the gym, and it really helps me, get the blood pumping, get out of my head. It's almost a meditative moment for me to be in the gym. And actually, I've had a lot of ideas come up to me while I'm in the gym.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's gym or walking for sure helps a lot.
Right.
And so when you travel, do you have a preference for either going to hotels or Airbnbs or kind of a mix of both? And you go like the high-end hotel or like the cheaper hotels?
Right. So I've done all of these. Of course, high-end hotels are always the nicest at the start. But personally, I kind of prefer to like go and live where the locals live. I kind of like to like try to blend in into their culture and to see what the average person does, what their culture is like. I think if you are staying in high-end hotels, you tend to be isolated or insulated away from what's happening on the ground. I'd like to get my fingers in the culture and see what do people eat, what kind of street food they have. I'm kind of like that kind of tourist. Because like if you stay in the Ritz, for example, you can stay in the Ritz in any country, and it's going to be pretty much the same experience. You don't really learn anything. You don't really experience anything different. You don't really see how different people live their lives. Yeah, so I prefer to tend towards the side of living in Airbnb and apartments.
Yeah, that's a good point. The best memories I had, the best time I had were when I was living in either Airbnb, even though the experience wasn't always fun. Sometimes it was a bit frustrating, but it was always the best experience to kind of be in a nice neighborhood around kind of local places. So I totally relate to that. But hotels are kind of nice sometimes.
Yeah, once in a while,
Yeah, totally agree with that. So what would be your advice for people who want to start to travel and trade? Should they kind of begin to travel as soon as they can, or should they wait till the trading is solid? When should they kind of start to do it?
So this is going to be difficult because I think like I generally don't give prescriptions because like everybody's situation is different, right? It depends. Yeah, you need to make your own call. I would say, however, that if you need to make money and you are looking, first of all, if you need to make money, you shouldn't be doing it at trading, right? I think trading is something you should be doing on top of what you already have until you can figure out how to get it to work. Then you might start to shift towards trading. So that aside, I think it's going to be slightly stressful if you feel that you need to make money, or more than slightly stressful if you feel you need to make money on top of being in an unfamiliar place. I would suggest getting your shit together first where you are, because if you can't do it where you are, it's very unlikely you can do it elsewhere. The caveat being, if being at home is a very negative place for you to be and you feel more at ease, you feel more comfortable, especially if the cost of living is lower overseas, then that might be something worth considering. But you need to have some kind of a safety net, right? You don't go there with like $100 in your bank account. You need to have some, I would say, have some backup, some amount you have saved. And then if it doesn't work out, you can come back and not be too worse off than if you left.
To be honest, the first time I went to trading and traveling, 2017, I had to draw on pretty fast after. I wasn't fully ready for it. I had like a good idea of it, but I wasn't like fully there yet. Right. So it took me a few months kind of sort it out, and then I had to go back to Canada after and kind of work on my trading more. And I didn't have much. I had some savings, not a lot, but that really helped me to kind of not fall short and be able to still travel anyway. So it was different first for sure.
Exactly. I think if you want to get a taste of it, go for a week, go for a month, but don't stay. Don't expect to go and stay like 2 years. Have a taste of it, come back, be motivated to get something working, and then consider going. Like when I started to travel, I did it like 2 weeks at a time, and then 1 month, and then 3 months, and then it started to get longer and longer.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. That's really nice. So since you have a blog, you probably talk with a lot of traders on a daily basis. What are some things that kind of traders have problems with the most? What are some of the biggest mistakes or issues that they have to work on?
Right. So again, like it's difficult to say because what is a mistake for one trader might not be a mistake for another trader. So it's very difficult to give your listeners like a catch-all thing. But that being said, I think one of the things I've noticed many traders that are struggling with trading face is that they try to trade all different kinds of setups. They try to trade breakouts, they try to trend trade, they try to fade, they try all kinds, and they end up being mediocre at all of these, right? So I would say consider spending your time on just one setup. That's one good setup that you're very familiar with, that you're an expert at, that if you look at the setup, you can see things that somebody else can't see, right? So that's the kind of focus I think I would recommend for most traders. You get really good at one thing, and then from there, like you can go very far with it. And it's a lot easier to focus on one thing compared to being scattered everywhere. So that's my suggestion.
Mm-hmm. And how do you know when it's time to add more setup to it? Is it when you have good results or when you feel like it?
So my experience, so that would depend, right? So if your setup is dependent on the market phase. So let's say you're a trend trader, you can only really trade if there are trends. Then you might want to look across assets, right? So you might want to look at the different currency pairs, the minor currency pairs, maybe even the S&P index, for example. But as much as possible, my recommendation would be to focus on a kind of setups that happen often enough, but is independent of market phases. Yeah, if possible. If not, then you might have to apply the same approach to other assets, right? And this actually applies also not just about your strategy. So let's say you're a trend trader, right? It's not just that you're a trend trader, but you're a trend trader on the pound dollar, for example, because how a trend moves on the pound dollar is different from how a trend moves on the dollar yen, for example. So you can be a trend trader on one pair, and you can be another trend trader on a different pair. So you're still a trend trader, but you sort of dual specialize, right? But the general idea is try to keep your favorite setups to one particular kind and get really, really good at it. I would say become world-class at it, because that's how you rise above everybody else.
That's a good point. So a lot of people ask me how much pairs I should trade, and I always say I trade about 15 pairs myself, but I have a setup that's really consistent between them. Right. How many pairs do you trade?
Right now, just one. Right. So I used to have more, but then what I did was I realized that the performance on the other pairs were not as good as the performance on one pair. And I would rather trade with a larger lot size, of course, within reason, than to trade, smaller lot sizes across all 5 pairs, for example, right? So it's a lot more concentrated, but it's a lot more, in my opinion, controlled. And I understand it a lot better. I'm getting better results. So that's why I'm focusing my attention on.
That's good, but this shows a time frame. So what kind of time frame do you look at for that one pair?
So all kinds. So because I'm trading one time frame, I look at all the time frames. I look at everything about it that I otherwise couldn't do if I did it across, let's say, 5, 10 pairs, right? Yeah. So that's the benefit of trading one pair, because you can know everything about it.
That's interesting to know. Yeah, that's really cool. I never thought about trading one pair only, but that makes sense. Interesting.
Right. So I would say, like you probably do your own reviews, right? So you look at across X number of years, this pair, this setup. Which one gives the most consistent, or the one with the return profile that you resonates the best, or that you think makes the most sense, and just trade larger, right? Why do you need to split your attention up and trade something that's inferior? Unless you use it for diversification purposes. But if you're using it for diversification purposes, then maybe you're not that confident with the first approach, right? So it's a balance between how confident you are and the numbers, and like how comfortable you are focusing on one thing versus maybe 3, 5 things. So it all depends. Like for me, I find my results are the best if I'm a more purist, in the sense I do also, by the way, look at other currency pairs, but I only trade one. So I find that I'm the most effective as a trader with that approach, with a focused approach.
Interesting. I'm sure people in the comments will ask, so which pair is it? Which pair do you trade?
Okay, so this is the euro dollar, the most popular one. Yeah.
Interesting. So this is the pair that I performed the worst in.
Okay. So right. So that's good, right? So like you have your own niche in your own pair.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I guess it's going to trade only one pair, which is something I find interesting as well. So you would have a way to take more trades in that same pair?
Again, it's becoming more and more focused, in the sense that I wait patiently for a setup. And if I see a good setup, I go heavy. So not heavy in the sense I don't risk 10% of my account, for example, but I go heavier than some people say 1 to 2% of your account. I go larger than that because I've done my homework, because I've done this trade thousands of times. I can tell when it goes wrong. I can keep my stops at a point where it makes sense based on my experience. So all of these things I mentioned, I can only learn if I did it through experience. So this is something algos will struggle to do, in my opinion. And it's also why I feel like the way I trade now exactly will be difficult for someone to replicate. Unless they've put in the work, they look at the same things I look at, and all of these take time to develop. So the thing about trading is not just about to me at least, it's not just about making money. It's about how do you make money repeatedly and sustainably, right? Because, for example, algos are coming up, right? Algos are starting to become a thing in the markets. And how do you out-trade an algo, right? You need to start looking at ways of trading and seeing the market in ways that an algo struggles to, at least at this level.
At the same time, you need a lot of data to know that this pair works the best and this pair works with that strategy for sure.
Right.
So you cannot just look at your results for 3 months and say, oh, I'll just trade this pair. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Any topics you didn't cover or talk about that you would like to mention or kind of focus on in the interview?
I think we're good. I think actually, I would like to ask you a question sure. As an interviewer of so many traders. I think what do you think you have learned from interviewing so many different traders that you wouldn't have learned if you didn't? If you were just alone and just reading forums, but through speaking with people, through picking their brains, what is one or two things you feel that has changed the way you look at trading or has changed your approach to trading?
That's a tough question. It's definitely not methodology or strategies, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. It's more something about, so there's two things, right? The first one is about the mindset. I didn't see trading the same way that I did without talking to traders. So I see it in a different, more like a probability way. Mm-hmm. I see it more in a way where you shouldn't care too much about every trade that you take. Right. So that's the biggest thing. But the other thing I think that is more important is the consistency and the constant reminders of doing something and keeping on track with things. I think that's been the best lesson for me. It's when you talk to so many traders every single week, you got to think on top of things and you got to kind of think about this way, and you kind of never slip up too much out of your routines. So that for me has been really helpful. And that's why I continue doing the podcast even now without, I don't have much to gain from it, but I still get this constant reminder and this constant motivation to work on things and keep improving. So that's what matters to me. All right. And that's pretty much the main thing that I've learned.
Right. And the great thing is that you're doing it for all the traders who are listening in.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
You're doing the hard work for all of us. So thank you.
It's not hard, but I just really like it anyway. So totally fun.
That's great. Yeah.
Awesome, Chris. So what can people find you if they want to connect with you or reach out after the interview? Where can they see your blog and read your content?
Right. So I have a blog that's at pipmavens.com. My email is on there. I also have a mailing list. So that's where I keep in contact with the people who want to hear updates about me. So whenever there's a new blog post or whenever I'm trying something new, I would send out an email. So you can get on that mailing list by watching a video on the site and then, the usual fill in your email address kind of thing. But this is the main way I communicate via email and through my site, my blog.
Awesome. Very nice. And you also have a book, right? You want to mention about it?
I've written, I have a couple actually, it depends on what you're, I think, okay. So if you're really a beginner and you don't really understand what trading is about. So I have a book on Amazon. It's called Forex Dreaming. It gives you an idea about how the game is rigged against most retail traders to succeed. So there are a lot of conflicts of interest, whether it's from forums or, for example, if you think you can learn how to trade from baby pips, you're gonna have a bad time. So why is that the case, right? All of these things I explore in that book. So that gives you a more meta level view. And it's just $1. So just read it. Yeah. So that would be the one I would say would be the one I would recommend to new traders who don't really understand how the infrastructure, how the retail trading industry is structured.
Interesting. I'll definitely have a look at it for fun. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So Chris, I like to ask my guest this question at the end of the podcast, which is, if you could give people one piece of advice on how to become better traders, what would that one piece of advice be?
So I have a list of 5 principles that I put up on my site. And so one of them, I think, would probably be the one I want to share. And that is that making money in trading has got nothing to do with money. So if you are looking at the money while you are trading, you are going to have a bad time. Paradoxically, we are all in this for the money, but so the analogy I give is that if you are fighting in a ring, let's say you're fighting against a championship in a boxing championship ring, right? You don't just keep staring at the trophy while you're fighting, right? You focus on dodging, you focus on punching. These are the things that have got nothing to do with the prize, right? And so focus on the work, focus on the process, and let go of the idea that you need to see a certain result within a certain timeline, because that will come, right? I think there's more reward than you think is available for you. But at the same time, in order to get it, you need to let go of wanting it. Yeah.
That's really good advice. I totally agree with that. That's awesome. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your time and your advice to my listeners. I hope people got value from this interview. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts and what you like from this interview. And we'll connect pretty soon. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk pretty soon.
Thank you for having me on. Good to be speaking with you.